Boom! Welcome back to another episode of Evolving Through Experience, where we discuss and growth in every aspect, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, and beyond. Today, guys, we have a special guest. We in a different studio for the first time ever, but it's definitely well worth it, and I'm looking forward to sharing this story. Today, we have Aziza. I pronounced it right, correct?
Yes, Aziza.
Okay, perfect. And if I didn't, definitely correct me. I know you told me, so I'm glad I pronounced it right. So now I'm going to try the last name.
Go ahead.
Aziza Kibibi. Kibibi. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Well, I'm always looking to learn. And obviously, like I said, we're here to talk about evolving. So that's just another example. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. I'm excited. It's nice to meet you. Excited
Nice to meet you
get
as
this
well.
Conversation going. And, you know, as a young Black man, I commend you on holding the conversation that we're about to have. So
for sure, I appreciate that. Honestly, I'm looking forward to it. And I just want to say, this was last minute, but it was divine timing. Mm-hmm. I'm definitely I'm big on divine timing and understanding how things work, obviously within the universe and the world. So I'm grateful that we could even do this today. So I just want to thank you again.
Yeah, sure. No, you're right about divine timing, though, because today was packed.
Hey, well, I'm glad I could fit into your schedule. Yes, I'm glad. Yes. So obviously, guys, y'all know what we about to discuss today. Today, obviously, like per any other episode, it's always judgment free. We're definitely going to be talking about some serious topics today that I know so many people that can relate to it. And even if you can't, I'm sure you'll still be able to gain something out of this conversation today. So with that being said, I want to start honestly from the beginning. I went through your story, and I just want you to start from the beginning, and then from there, I'll just start asking questions versus just jumping all over the place.
Okay. So, wow.
Childhood.
Childhood. You were okay from the very, very beginning.
Yes.
So I was born and raised in Paterson, New Jersey, to a mom and a dad who got married. To a young man, and a young Black woman. They got married when they were teenagers in high school, and they were high school sweethearts. My mom was from England. My father was from Alabama. Alabama by way of Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
And my mom is of Jamaican descent, so my grandmother is Jamaican. Well, things seemed to be going well. I was their first child. Over the years, my mom had 9 children. At some point, their relationship kind of changed, meaning that my father decided to embrace polygamy. And he was very Afrocentric, very into Black culture and the role that Black people have played in America through being enslaved and descendants of Africans. And he changed his name from Eric McGill, which was what he quote unquote slave name, to Aswad Ayinde. So he changed his lifestyle to a polygamous lifestyle and decided to homeschool his children. So I was homeschooled. My mom, who had 9 children, all of my siblings were homeschooled as well. And though I was born in the hospital and my brother was born in the hospital, my father delivered himself the rest of my siblings. Now, he was a cabinet maker at the time. He was self-employed, during his young adulthood. And he started building furniture for pretty wealthy and famous people. Like he built furniture for Queen Latifah. He built furniture for one of the members of Living Color. And from there, he decided to kind of enter the music business. He himself wanted to be a music artist. He wrote songs. He sung them. He produced them. He started managing different artists, trying to develop artists, which eventually led him into music video directing. And he met the Fugees. He met Wyclef Jean and Lauryn Hill and Proswell.
I love Lauryn Hill.
Yeah.
And I even know I'm young. Yes, I do.
And on their album, The Score, he met them around that time before they released the album, The Score. And he directed a couple of their music videos, one being Killing Me Softly, which he won an MTV Music Video Award for Best Direction. But throughout all of this, what a lot of people did not know was that he was physically abusive. Correct. So he was abusive to my mother. and any of his other women. I grew up knowing that my parents had a polygamous relationship, that my father, yes, he was legally married to my mother, but he also had girlfriends and co-wives, and she had co-wives.
And what age was this? Not to cut you off. What age was this? Cause I know I remember reading your story into this. I know, was this around what age? I believe it was 17, or when did this was introduced?
To who? To his lifestyle?
As far as when you started realizing this is when he pretty much got into
No, I
was
lifestyle. Much younger.
Okay,
I believe I was around 7, maybe 6, 7 years old. I feel like most of my life, like what I remember is that my father was polygamous and my mom had co-wives and sister wives. So I was pretty young.
Yeah, okay.
You know, when they started, when he started. But one of the other things a lot of people didn't know was that he also started molesting me when I was 8 years old. And he started raping me when I was 10. And by the time I was 12, he deemed me his sex slave. Now, what he had told my mother was that it was helping my skin. My father did not believe in Western medicine. So though I grew up sickly with different allergies, untreated asthma, I had really bad eczema all over my skin, he treated everything with herbs, holistic medicine, Eastern medicine. I mean, he would practice acupuncture on my mother. So that was like, he really believed in holistic health. And he thought that the healthcare system was just essentially making people sicker for money. So when my mother found out that he was molesting me, he told her that because of my skin, it was helping my skin. And what he told me was that all fathers did this with their daughters and that he had to teach me to be a woman. So that's how the abuse started. As I got older, he became more violent. He, like, my role as his daughter just completely, it didn't exist anymore. I didn't feel like that he loved me. Because he essentially was practicing all of his demented sexual desires on me, even though he still loved women. Like he adored women. But of course, a grown woman has their own mind. They could say no, they could resist, they could not partake in the things that he liked. Where with me, I was his daughter. He could control me. So I eventually got pregnant with my first child by him when I was 15. He delivered her on a construction site. He purchased a house in East Orange, New Jersey.
Correct. I remember seeing that.
And essentially moved his family away from any of our extended family. So I no longer had contact with my grandmother, my aunts, cousins. People just didn't know where we even went. And he kept us on this construction site as he renovated the house. And it was during this period that he met people who then introduced him to the Fugees. So over the years...
And they never knew.
They didn't know anything. No, they didn't know anything. Over the years, I was impregnated by my father 5 times, right? 5 times. 4 of them was born. One of them I miscarried. My youngest daughter, by my father, she passed away in 2010 due to inborn errors. She had different genetic disorders.
And I'm gonna stop you right there because I definitely want to go in on that a little more because I know I read that in the story. So obviously I know you said he moved away from obviously your grandparents. I know they came here from England, so they had a bad relationship. So that's also another reason he just pretty much was able to get away and you couldn't communicate with them at all.
Right. He had a tumultuous relationship with my grandparents because they did not like him. They did not like him. They did not like the fact that he was polygamous. They did. My grandmother and I believe other family members did suspect that he was molesting me. So that just made the relationship, even between my grandparents and my mom, strained because she was committed to my father.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that because I know from reading your story, you didn't know you knew deep down this was wrong, but I know you said you only knew your father's teachings because you was homeschooled, correct?
Right.
So
yes.
you didn't know, you didn't have any other outlet to ask anybody. You didn't go to school to know like what's right from wrong, but deep down you still knew it was wrong because you could feel it in your spirit, obviously.
Not only that, I mean, what he was doing to me was physically painful.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so with your mother, I want to ask because I know from even reading it, she knew this was going on and she did she ever like have a conversation with you why she didn't step up? Because I know she said one time and then she got beat for it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, she did. When she confronted my father at some point because he also molested me with one of his girlfriends. So he would set up that he and his girlfriend would abuse me together. And that's when she, I guess, decided that, well, while initially she believed what he was doing might be good for my health, now you're introducing someone else. What does that have to do with my health? So she did confront him. He beat her with a belt, and then she never really questioned him much after that.
At this point, when she finally spoke up, at that point, I would say it was too late, but this was when you already had a child, or it was beforehand?
No, it was before. It was still while I was a child myself. Okay. It was still while I was a child myself. We did eventually speak about it in my adulthood. Yes, I spoke about it with her. And essentially, she said that she was afraid. There was one time when I was young, I believe I was maybe about 11 or 12 years old. And I asked her, why don't we run away from daddy? And she said, because one, she did not have any money. And she felt like she could not take care of all of her children alone and that he would find us. So there definitely was that, you know, she was being oppressed by him as well. She was afraid of him. At the same time, she still loved him enough where she essentially, I mean, in my opinion, chose him over her children. So, yeah.
And I don't disagree with you. And I want to ask because I think it's disgusting, but I think it's important to understand the mindset because I think this is a way we can avoid these situations because obviously you was able to overcome it, which is beyond, I can't even put it into words that how amazing it is for you to even overcome this. But at the same time, this is something that could be avoided in the future. So I want to understand your father's mindset on what made him even think that this was okay by any measure. Like, what was his logic? And I want to understand that just for that reason, because maybe it's somebody else out there that's thinking like this and they need to know whether that's a parent, a mother or a father from the opposite parent. And they need to understand like, these are the signs to watch out for.
So, okay, that's a really loaded question. As far as what his logic was, it changed over the years. I mean, he went from telling me and my siblings that a spirit woke him up one night and told him to molest me, to the same thing what he told my mother, that it was for my health, to he was ordained by God. By the time when my daughter was born and she did not have any outward birth defects, disorders that we could see, and she doesn't, he decided that he had to now create a new race because the human race was going to be destroyed at some point in the future. And so it changed over the years. Now, if that was BS and he just used different ideas to manipulate and maintain control over his family,
which many people do.
I don't know. Right. That could be very possible. However, I did see him. He was on a spiritual journey. Dare I say, he himself, he was very into different forms of spiritualities and religion. He was into studying different religions. He would learn about being an enlightened human. He was really about, for some reason, doing the right thing when it comes to Black people and Black culture and elevating us as a community. So there was this dichotomy with him where he was completely adored in the community. He was respected in the community. I mean, he had people, men that followed him and followed his beliefs and felt empowered by him. But then he had this other side of him that was sick and demented. Now, because of his ego and his level of him being so self-absorbed and narcissistic, he really felt like he could do no wrong. Not only that he could do no wrong, but everything that he did was ordained by God, in his own words. So I think a combination of those things, I guess, lent to his logic, you know, to answer your question. It lent to his logic. And essentially, he just felt like he could do what he wanted to do. And his desires, because he was so, he had this grandiose viewpoint of himself, his desires were important enough where it didn't matter who they hurt or who they affected in a negative way. So to answer your question about what to look for, yeah, I think people who get into relationships with others, because it's not only men that molest children. There are not only male pedophiles. While they represent most of the population of pedophiles, there are also women who are pedophiles as well. And I would say the red flags would be that, you know, one, just an extra interest in children and wanting to isolate children to be with them, having inappropriate conversations with them. And then even in abusive relationships, definitely when someone in a relationship is trying to isolate you from your friends and your family, are trying to gaslight you with these different ideas that, you know, in order to kind of break down your will and your own perspective and your sense of autonomy, those are all signs of like having somebody control you in any way, whether it be sexual, financial, or physical.
Yeah, which are all horrible.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yes.
So, and with that, I want to ask, when you had your first child, obviously by your father, what was, I just want to understand your mindset at this time. Obviously, you're still a child. 'Cause I know you said 14, right?
I was 15 when I got pregnant, yes.
15, okay. What was your mindset? Because obviously from 15 to now, I don't know your age now. We're not going to put it out there. But at 15 then to now, I want to understand, we're going to go over this course of time to see like the evolution. But at that moment, what would you say your mindset is? Because I can only imagine, honestly, and I say that lightly because I haven't been in that position. So you having a child by your father, he's finding out and he's thinking this is okay because the baby didn't come out with just genetic disorders. At that point, are you feeling a way towards the child? Like what is your mindset then? Because I don't think it's wrong even if you did, because that's a hard mental place to be in and spiritually. So I want to understand your mindset at that moment.
So my mindset at the time, because we were a family, well, I'm the oldest of what, from what we know, 21 children by my father. So I was raised in an environment where, one, I was looked up to as a big sister. I helped my mom take care of my siblings especially when my father's music video directing business kicked off. And even before that, when he really excelled in the cabinetry business, I was left home with my siblings from a young age. So I had to cook for them. I taught them what the education that I was allowed to teach them. And I love them dearly. So I think innately I have a strong maternal instinct. And seeing so many of my siblings come into this world, helping in the delivery process, even like as a teenager, when I was 12, 13, I helped deliver my siblings. So by the time that I got pregnant and I had my child, it was sort of the perspective of, it's another child for the family, right? There was that. And then I loved babies and I loved children. So I did not have, even though my daughter was a result or product of, I don't even like really using that term because, you know, she's a product of God and the universe and me. But because she came out of something that was so horrific, that did not make me see her any different. It didn't taint her purity. So, and that was the case with any of my other children. I call them my lotus flowers because lotus flowers grow out of the most dirtiest mud that you can think of. And so when they came into the world, I just dedicated myself to protecting her. Now, I was afraid. I was afraid because I knew what my father was capable of. And after spending most of my childhood trying to protect my siblings, was one of the things that my father used against me. He would tell me that if I told or if I fought him, there were times that I fought him, I tried to run away, but he told me that if I told or if I fought him, then he would just abuse my sisters. And
That's how he knew it was wrong. He knew what he was doing.
Right. He knew it was wrong. But at the same time, I mean, when you're talking about the relationship between a child and a parent, children question their parents all the time, but the child is the person in the dynamic that needs to be guided, needs to be molded, needs to be raised. So they don't really have much of a voice. You see what I'm saying? And then their thoughts and feelings are not really considered because the parent knows better, essentially. Allegedly, the parent knows better. So many children, even if they do question something that their parent is doing, if their parent makes sense of it to them, and threatens them and punishes them and coerces them, eventually they're going to comply. And in my case, between having the desire to, I loved my parents, so I had the desire to make them happy, to make them feel proud of me. I wanted them to be proud of me. And when my father took advantage of that and then combined it with putting this responsibility of protecting now my siblings from him, that just really broke me down. And then I just complied. I stopped complaining. So by the time I had my daughter, I was essentially a zombie. You know, I was just doing what I needed to do in order to survive every day.
And I want to ask that, and I will probably come back to it because it's a few questions out of that, because you even now, I'm glad you said that you didn't have that. So what could you give to a parent that's unfortunately been, even somebody that's not even raped by their own parent and had a child, but just in general, how do you, and I don't believe it's a right or wrong answer, but what could you give to them to let them know, like, don't look at this child as the same sick spirit that you view the other person for doing the wrongdoing? How do you pretty much take that perspective and separate them two? Because you could see how it could definitely be like, all right, now somebody may not like the child or hate the child because of the product of how it came about. So what is a perspective, not even perspective, what is a thing you could tell a parent or anybody in general, obviously, that's going through that process right now?
Well, one, the child is not to blame. And let me go back.
I know it's easier said than done, but yeah,
it is. It's easier said than done. I think, of course, part of it has a lot to do with the trauma of the victim who then had a child as a result of rape or incestuous abuse. So I am sympathetic, and I completely understand that if they are not healing their own trauma, then something that is a product of that trauma, I completely understand them seeing. It's just a reminder of the trauma, because their process is to try to forget what happened to them. And you have this reminder, you absolutely cannot forget. So you would have to go into actually healing from that trauma, and finding different mechanisms and tools to do that. Now, of course, you have a new baby. A baby can't wait for you to do that. So nothing is all good and nothing is all bad. And the fact of the matter is, giving birth to life is damn near a miracle. It's damn near a miracle.
Shout out to all the mothers.
Yes, definitely. And the dads too.
Hey, you're right. But shout out to y'all. Yeah, definitely.
It's nothing short of a miracle to bring a life into this world. And I think that if a woman does have a child that is a result of some form of trauma, if they could focus on the purity of what the human that they brought into this world is. That would be one way. And also see the potential, because every child has the potential to do great things, to change the world for the better, to contribute to the progression of humanity. And if you focus on seeing that potential, then that could help you kind of start dissipating the negative aspect of how this child came to be. And then of course yourself. I mean, no matter what, when I look at my children, I see myself. I see myself in so many different ways, through not just their facial features, but their curiosities, their talents. And I see that. And I knew that even when my first daughter was born, I looked into her eyes and I saw her soul, and I fell in love with her right away. And I could not see anything else other than God and beauty and myself and the universe and potential. And then she just became more of a driving force for me to eventually work on escaping my father. It didn't matter how long it was going to take, but I knew that I had to get her away from him. And I had to protect her from him. Yeah, so.
and I mean, we definitely gonna get to that, because I remember reading the escape plan that you came up with, and you spoke about it briefly in the book from what I have seen. So with that, while we still talking about children, what is the process of you speaking to them and explaining this? Because now, like you said, we as parents, because I'm a father too, I'm a young father. Okay. So as we as parents, obviously, it's our goal, biggest, to instill as much knowledge and obviously protect our children. So navigate me through this conversation of, when do you tell your child, I guess all of them, that your father is also my father, and it wasn't what I wanted, but it's what happened? Like, how do you navigate that conversation? And I know it's no easy way, and I know it's not the birds and the bees talk. Right. There's no perfect. Right. What's the age, if any, to have that?
So with my daughter, once authorities got involved in the process of me escaping my father,
and we could talk about that too after the authorities. Okay, I remember that.
Okay. She was 5 at the time, so she remembered him. But by that time, my father was raising my children with them not knowing that I was also their sister. So they, as far as her understanding, was that daddy has multiple wives. Some are young, some are older. Her grandmother, essentially my mom, was just one of her moms. And she knew that I called him a swat. I called him by his first name. So she knew nothing, but she did know him as her father. And then, because he had decided that these were his special blue blood children, that essentially was the beginning of a new special race, he spoiled them, essentially. He treated them like they were royalty. And in different ways, my mother became resentful of that, because jealous. Right. And I mean, he was molesting her daughters. He was raping her daughters. But then my daughters, he was giving them everything that they wanted. So that created its own kind of rift in her relationship. So when they came back from foster care, my children were in foster care for 3 years. My daughter would ask me, well, who is her father? Because as far as she knew, her foster parents and the social workers told her that the person that she knew as her father was really her grandfather. And I told her that I would wait till she got older. I did get her back from foster care when I was 9. I told her that, well,
when was 9?
When she was 9.
She was 9.
She was 9, right?
Okay.
So she was taken when she was 5. I got her back when she was 9. You. And I told her that I would explain to her when I felt like she could really grasp and understand. So she was patient, even though some days, she'd get sassy and she'd ask me, well, Mommy, when are you going to tell me? And I finally told her when she was 13. And it was answering her question, like, okay, Mommy, who is my dad? Who is my dad? And I feel like there's something going on here. And now I need you to tell me. So I did.
Especially since the social workers took it upon themselves to mention this. And I'm sure they didn't do it in the most caring possible way.
Right. And the thing is that they were aware that he was my father. That's actually what kind of created, like, that caused a red flag, because they was aware that he was my father, and then also my children's father. So I told her, I sat down and I explained to her what the dynamic was, and she said, I knew it. She apparently she had already put some things together. And we talked about it, and I told her, that I was a kid. I was younger than her. It was wrong. She understood all of that. She had been being raised in the school system. So she went to school. She knew or had an idea about sex and what was right and wrong. And I had already started open conversation with my kids around sex, surrounding sex. They already knew that they could ask me anything that they wanted to, and we talk about it. Right. And we talk about it. So she did become very angry. She did become very angry.
Rightfully
she became angry, right, with our father and her grandmother as well. And she hugged me, and we hugged. And then just over the years, like anything she asked me within her own time. And this is what my parenting style is, to build a relationship with each of my children based on their individuality, based on the things that I believe that they need, based on their weaknesses and their strengths. So I told each one of my children at different stages in their life. When I told my two other children, my second daughter and then my oldest son, by my father, my son was younger. He was 10, I think. And then my daughter might have been 12. And it was because what triggered it was because my youngest daughter by my father had just died. And her death brought a lot of things up within the family, and it started to become even more confusing for my children. And my sisters, they hadn't reached a certain level of healing that I had.
And they went through it as well.
Yeah, four of my sisters did. And it just became a very toxic environment. So my kids didn't understand what was going on. Well, my younger children didn't understand what was going on. And I sat them down and I told them. And my daughter, she got very emotional. And my son, he was just quiet. But then as they got older, anytime, I don't shy away from conversations. I don't hush my children or make things off limit for them to talk about with me. So that's just how they grew up. They just know that to have open communication. And that was important to me because
you didn't have that.
Right. I didn't have that. And that was my way of trying to keep them safe. Like, you have to talk to me about when you're uncomfortable with someone. Like, one thing I do tell parents is, if your child does not want to hug or kiss an aunt or uncle, don't force them to.
Agreed.
Like, they have to understand that their body is theirs. Because then if you do, then it leaves room for someone to take advantage of that, because they're an adult. And children should do what adults say. So my children had that. And anytime they were uncomfortable with somebody, they would tell me. Comfortable situation, they would tell me. And just that open communication then just keeps things flowing, and I think it built a certain level of confidence in them.
No, and that's a beautiful thing, and I'm gonna take accountability too, because I even had to realize that with my child, because obviously I always said with even other people, like his grandparents may ask for a hug and he say no, and he's 2, so he's learning new words and saying whatever. But even if I ask for a hug, I got to a point of understanding, like, if he say no to me, that's okay, that's his right. Even though it's like I don't know if he's joking or whatever, I just let him, because I want him to understand as he's developing that it's okay to say no.
Right.
But when he be saying no for everything though. But the hugging is okay, that's fine. You don't have to give me a hug, bro.
Yeah.
But other than that, I definitely agree with that for 100%. And even to speak on that, obviously not the same level of situation, but I remember even when I was a younger child, being in the church, my mom always would take me to church, and it was this one person in church that would always want to talk to me, and every time he talked to me, he got to put his hand on my shoulder. And one time, it was just in the middle of the church, I said, "Yo, bro, stop touching me." I went crazy, but it wasn't like I don't know. I don't think he meant anything by it, but it's just like, bro, I don't like to be touched. Like, I don't know you like that. You may have good intentions, but stop touching me. So that is reminding me of that situation. So I'm glad you said that. So, but just to go from there though, I know you said, I know that it was great advice for any parent, with obviously letting your child have freedom to speak and have that open conversation. And like you said, I know you did that because that was something you always wanted, and you didn't have that opportunity, correct? Okay, so I want to go into the story now of how this came about, in the sense of how did the authorities get involved. I remember reading it, but I'm gonna let you tell it because I can't tell you a story better than you. But let's talk about the situation of obviously the hospital and everything, and as far as the authorities getting involved, and pretty much I would say the beginning of changing this for you to start truly healing.
Okay, so I mean, this actually was not the first time authorities got involved. Yeah, my father was able to shirk the authorities a couple of times, but the time that was effective was when one night, not one night, one morning, my 5-month-old, my son, born by my dad, woke up with seizures, and I didn't understand. I didn't understand what was happening.
You didn't know what it was.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. My interpretation was that he was dying and coming back to life. So my brother, who worked in the music industry with my father, had come to visit on that day, and my father was out of town, and he convinced my mother to allow him to take me and my son to the hospital.
And your brother, sorry, not to cut you off, your brother didn't know what was going on,
No,
correct?
my brother knew. The
whole everybody knew. Okay.
Yeah, when I was, I think I was 14. I could have been 13. My father sat all of my siblings down and told them that he was keeping me. And that they were to watch me and make sure that I did not speak to any boys or anybody outside the family. So he actually created, this structure, this family structure, where if I was caught talking to someone when he wasn't around, then my siblings were to tell on me, and there would be consequences, so on and so forth. So they knew, even before he started molesting my sisters, they knew that I belonged to daddy, and I would not be marrying anybody else. So,
which is a sick statement in itself, but yeah, I understand what you mean.
Yeah. So this day, my brother convinced my mom to let him take us to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, I mean, it was all foreign to me. They was asking me questions about filling out forms. And over the course of my life, during the portion of my life that my father was abusing me, I was always looking for ways out. But not just ways out with doing the least damage, meaning I did not want to negatively impact my family. If I tried to run away, I didn't want my siblings to get in trouble. If I fought back, I didn't want mommy to get beaten. So there was this responsibility that I took on. I mean, some of it was put on me as well, where all of my actions really dictated how other people were being treated, and that was stressful for me. So
unfortunate.
Yeah, so here we are now at the hospital, and I know daddy's coming back. He's getting on the first flight. As soon as he found out, he got on the first flight from where he was to come back to our town that we lived in. And I was thinking, well, how can I use this opportunity? How can I let somebody know indirectly where it wouldn't fall back on me, or it wouldn't hurt my siblings, or my brother wouldn't get in trouble? So I'm filling out the paperwork, and something told me to fill out, when it asked the question for medical insurance, who my parents were. So I filled out that he was my father. And when it asked about the father of my children, I filled out that he was the father of their children. And that raised a red flag. So once they started processing the paperwork, that raised a red flag. My father got to the hospital, and he threatened to take my son out the hospital. It turned out that he was having seizures because he was malnourished. He did not have enough vitamin D and calcium in his blood. He had developed rickets, and essentially it was affecting his brain and causing seizures because my father was extremely strict. I couldn't go outside unless he allowed me to. He also had me on a strict work day with helping with his business, and I could not breastfeed my son until I finished all of my assignments. So that essentially led to my son being malnourished. And he came, he threatened the doctors, told them that they're just trying to control his kids, and the doctors ended up calming him down. Then he did question, well, would they call DIFAS? They agreed not to call, which was known as Department of Youth and Family Services, is now DCPNP. But at the time they were called DIFAS. And the doctor assured him that they would not tell DIFAS anything. So my father agreed to leave my son in the hospital. He stayed there most of the time. He constantly threatened me. If I was to say anything, then he's going to kill my mom and he's going to kill my sisters. And so I didn't. I kept quiet. And then eventually DIFAS was called. A caseworker came in.
Was it from the hospital? They just told him they wasn't, and they still did.
Right.
Thankfully. Okay. I was about to say, because they got to be held accountable too. Yeah.
They still did. And I mean, he still ended up blaming me because he told me that I must have told him something, or I must have said something. And
lack of accountability is crazy.
But at the same time, he was compliant with them. They interviewed him. He allowed them to come to the house. They took my remaining children. I had 2 other children at the time, and allowed them to bring my children into the hospital for treatment. And then after that, that's how the ball started rolling. Now, this ball rolled for about 3 years because while my kids were in foster care, while my kids were under the custody of the state, my father found out where they were. He tried to kidnap them at one point out of the hospital. He continued to beat me and threaten me and my mom. And so there was still a cycle of abuse going on. And it took then one day me finally, while working to get my children back, that whole process educated me. It educated me on what pedophilia was. It educated me on what domestic violence was. So I'm learning all of these terms, and I'm learning how they affect people, right? And I'm realizing, well, these things are happening to me, and these things are happening to my mom and my sisters. We did not have definitions for it, but now I do. And now maybe there's somebody that could help, because my father raised me to believe that the government doesn't like Black people. And therefore, if we was to tell anybody, they would not help us. They'd only hurt us. So just having that fear of the system and having the fear of police kept us quiet as well, kept me quiet as well. So when then it gets to the point that now, even though he was orchestrating everything, I could not be on the phone with the caseworker unless he was present. He had to listen to every conversation. He was involved through the whole thing. He was continuing to rape me. I got pregnant again. He kidnapped me and took me out of state to deliver that child, because at some point I ended up in the hospital in labor, and my sister then told him that I was trying to tell a nurse that I was in danger. So he came, he took me out the hospital, and then all of this culminated into me just being more educated, getting stronger, and developing faith that there might be someone outside of our family that would help, did care enough. Because while, yes, I had horrible experiences with caseworkers in the foster care system, there were a couple that seemed sympathetic. There was a couple that made me feel that I was important. So one day when my father was about to molest one of my sisters, I stood up to him. And from there, a friend of the family's, then I also told a friend of the family's what was happening. and they took my mom to the police to report domestic violence, basically helped my sisters and my mom, you know, get a
help.
What are they called? Not a warrant, but a
protective custody.
Protected, right. A protection order against my father, and then my father went on the run. So that's how that started.
And I want to back up because it's like, I know you said you tried to do as much as you could to tell without getting them in trouble, such as your sister. But and correct me if I'm wrong, is this the same sister or even sisters or brothers that would intentionally tell on you to get you in trouble?
Yes.
So at what point, if any, like I want to understand it, and I think other people can too. So you're protecting the same people that's hurting you. So how did you get out of that? Did you ever get to the point where you was like, you know what, I don't care? Because whoever goes down, whoever's responsible needs to get in trouble. Not so much of, let me try to tell this person without getting them in trouble. Even though the same things was happening to them. Walk me through that.
They were children. I mean, I would forgive them. I would, if my brother told on me, and I mean, one time he told on me because a boy walked past. I was sitting on a porch doing my sister's hair, and a boy walked past and said hello to me, and he kind of hung around trying to talk to me. And I looked up at him, and my brother saw, and he told my father, and as punishment, my father sodomized me. And my brother, while my brother did not understand the severity of the consequences of what he did, I mean, he knew that I would get in trouble. He knew I would get in trouble, whether that be a beating or being grounded. But at the same time, I knew he did not fully understand. He's still a child. He was doing what his parent told him to do. Daddy told him to do this, and if he didn't do it, he would get in trouble himself. So I understood that dynamic, even though I was a child myself. So I forgave him. I knew that he really could not even comprehend what I was going through. And anytime my siblings did that, I forgave them because I knew that they didn't really understand. Was there ever any anger? Of course. I mean, these are my sisters. There's sibling rivalry anyway. But being in the position where I was responsible for them, not only just protecting them from my father, but also responsible for their education, and I cooked for them. I made their birthday cakes. So in a way, before I even started having children, they were like like my kids. So I forgave them for a lot of things growing up because I just knew that they simply didn't understand.
And when did that? And that was while you was growing up, or was this later on? You eventually forgave them.
No, later on as well. And then, I mean, of course, it was heartbreaking when then I realized that my father was molesting them as well. And then we just lived in an environment that was
including
just toxic.
The boys.
No, my father, no, he didn't. He didn't sexually
we said
abuse
them
the
as well.
boys.
Okay.
No, my sisters.
Sisters. Okay.
Yeah,
which is still wrong.
Yeah, and it's mostly a family of girls. I only have 3 brothers. Well, 3 brothers by my mother. I have other brothers by other women. But So once I found out that my father was molesting my sisters as well, I mean, I could feel nothing but heartbreak and sadness for them because I knew what I was going through. Yeah, I knew what I was going through. And then my father created this environment of competition. And essentially it was survival of the fittest. You had to, the understanding was to keep daddy happy. And if you kept daddy happy, then you did not get a black eye and you did not get called into the room as much. And, the rape wasn't as violent as it could have been. So it got to a point where, everybody was just trying to survive and walk on eggshells with him because anything could set him off. So I understood. And then even as we got into our adulthood, of course, there were still things that they continued to do because now everybody's traumatized. And after living a life of this, I was never in competition with my sisters, but I mean, younger siblings, they usually they see their older siblings. There's kind of like this competitive nature, but this became very counterproductive because when my father was raping the girls, then it was this idea that, well, there's a hierarchy because I'm the oldest, and then there's a second one and a third one, fourth one, and you're supposed to respect based on the hierarchy, right? If I'm the responsible one for the house, but then if daddy is favoring the youngest to rape, to have sex with, then the youngest feels like they're more in a position of power over everybody else. And essentially it ended up, and essentially it affected my mom as well. There was a point that my father, even though, yes, he was abusing me and I was the focus of his anger, but then there were times where he dismissed my mother on so many things, and then would choose me over her, so to speak. And then there was animosity, and then she kind of lost her position as far as respect as a parent in the household. And then I wasn't allowed to call her mommy anymore. I had to call her by her name. So there was a very extreme and unfortunate breakdown of the family structure with the abuse that he was doing.
So when, and again, I commend you to hear all of these things and see that you've been able to prevail from them. So when did you say your true healing? And I call this evolving. Just before I even say that, I call this evolving because it's a continuous process. And you correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure it's days where you still battle with this, but that doesn't mean you haven't evolved from it. So when was that period of when you was able to evolve and really say you found peace? And hopefully your other siblings did as well, as far as your other sisters. So when did that period happen for you where you felt like you truly evolved and you found peace within all of this?
Wow. Can I say I found peace within all of this?
And if you didn't, so be it.
I have found peace with the past. Let's say that. I found peace with the past, meaning I don't have regrets. If I had an opportunity to go back and change some things, of course I would. You know, I would tell little Aziza to tell somebody, right? Even though it may be scary, even though daddy might do some of the things that he is threatened to do, it's worth taking the risk to tell somebody. However, I think, one, I had my children. I do believe that their souls would have come to me. Either way, I would be their mom even if I had the opportunity to fall in love and get married. I think the children that I would have would be their souls. So, and those thoughts and feelings contribute to coming to terms. I would say coming to terms with the past and what happened to me. And then, of course, now being able to enjoy my life as it is now, having autonomy over my life, over my body, over the decisions that will now dictate what I do. They're mine. I had no control back then. Everything was told, everything that I did, I was instructed to do. So just being free and having an appreciation and seeing the direct contrast. I mean, essentially, like, I'm very affected by African American history and our roles as the descendants of stolen Africans and the traumas that our people have experienced in America. Agreed. And what I went through was in so many ways parallel to some of the experiences that specifically Black women throughout the history of slavery has had. So
exactly. Agreed.
Yeah, so it's given me, or I've chosen, because there are many people that experience this kind of trauma that choose to focus on the negative. So I have chosen to take my awareness and my understanding and my memories and use it for something productive to help further not only my personal progress, but my progress, the progress of our family, the progress of our community, the progress of our people, and the progress of humans in general. So I think deciding to take that is empowering in itself, to take something horrendous and turn it and use it to fuel something productive is a very, very, very powerful and liberating thing. And that has definitely contributed to me coming to terms with my past. Now, the reason why I say, well, I can't say that I'm particularly at peace with it is because the effects of sexual abuse and gender-based violence on a person, it completely removes them from their original path of life. So there will always be challenges, even if it's just, for me, even if it's just financial, so to speak, because I got started in life so much later because I had to work through my mental health issues and, well, I don't want to say mental health issues, but yeah, essentially I had to work through, I had to heal. And the fact that I had to heal, so many people who don't have to heal are way ahead of me. I was homeschooled, so I don't have, the education. I ended up getting my degrees going to college at 35 years old. And that in itself was like a setback, single mom.
And I still want to congratulate you for that because I remember reading that part too. So I definitely want to throw that out there for sure.
Thank you. Being a single mom and a single mom of, two disabled children with disabilities, like all of those things was a struggle. And I feel like I do have my days where I feel like it's very unfortunate that my father took away my many opportunities that I could have had to really live up to my potential.
I'm a bad girl.